Welcome back to the Bigger Than Birth podcast, where we're celebrating bigger bodies and beautiful births. I'm your host, Victoria Gaba, and each week we will be bringing you the real stories of plus-size moms as they share their journey through fertility, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. These stories highlight what it's like to navigate through this experience as a woman in a bigger body in hopes of creating representation for plus-size moms, both present and future. Thank you for being part of this community as we share these stories that are so much bigger than birth. Welcome to today's show. In today's episode, we sit down with Anjelica, a Texas mom of 3 who shares her story with an 11-year age gap between her first son and her new set of twins. Anjelica shares her experience with 2 surprise pregnancies, including the very emotional moment she found out she was having twins despite being on birth control. We discuss the complexities of her high-risk labeled pregnancy, where she faced significant medical bias, including a possible misdiagnosis of type 2 diabetes just based on her BMI, despite a normal A1C. From the dedication of writing her college paper while being induced with her first, to a harrowing emergency C-section story under general anesthesia with her twins, and the emotional journey of a long NICU stay, Anjelica provides a first-hand look at the resilience it takes to advocate for yourself in the delivery room as a plus-size mom. Let's dive into Anjelica's story. Hey, Anjelica, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Hello.
So I guess we will jump right in. If you will just kind of tell us a little bit about you, your family, and where y'all are living.
I'm Anjelica. I have 3 beautiful kids. I have an 11-year-old, and then I have 3-month-old twins. And it's me, my 2 sons, my daughter, and my boyfriend, and my dog living here in Texas.
We will go ahead and start with your son. So I know there's a little bit of an age gap between your
Yes.
first son and then the twins. So take us
Yes.
back to 11 years ago when you had your first son. Were you planning to get pregnant when you did at that time?
Absolutely not. So when I got pregnant with my oldest son, obviously he's 11, it was completely unexpected. The relationship I was in at the time, it was a rocky relationship during that point. We stuck it out for a year and then we ended up going our separate ways. And now it's like we're really good friends. But with my son, I was 20 when I got pregnant, 21 when I had him. I found out I was pregnant. And honestly, I wasn't expecting it, obviously, whatsoever. I was on birth control. We had used condoms. And if you didn't know this, don't take antibiotics when you're on birth control because antibiotics kind of like make it so your birth control doesn't work. And me being like a naive 20-year-old, I didn't know that. When I found out I was pregnant, I know this is TMI, but I had bled for the entire month of January. And normally I was like, that was not normal. And then I didn't have a period in February. And then in March, took a test and it was positive. By the time I found out I was pregnant, I think I was 12 weeks along. So I was a little far along. I think I finally went to the doctor, finally got an appointment when I was like 20 weeks. So the first 20 weeks, I didn't have any type of prenatal care other than just like taking prenatal vitamins. Just because one, the doctors were so backed up, and also I didn't find out until I was super far along.
Did you have any other symptoms like morning sickness, or did you notice anything
I
else that changed?
I had like a week where I was sick, and I'm like, oh, I probably just have like the flu or something. Like, didn't really think much about it. And then after I found out I was pregnant, morning sickness like really hit me, even though it was already after my first trimester. I know morning sickness can hit you anytime, and I think I had morning sickness the rest of my pregnancy, um, from that 12 weeks on. But yeah, no, I took Zofran, and then after a little while, it just kind of became manageable with making sure I was eating something like right when I woke up and just kind of staying hydrated.
Did you go into labor naturally with the first?
No. So with him, I did have gestational diabetes. But that one was just kind of managed through checking my blood pressures. And so there was nothing like I didn't have to take like insulin or anything like that. And so with that, I had low amniotic fluid. And so I was going in for like my weekly non-stress tests and ultrasounds. And they were like at 37 weeks and 6 days. I had an ultrasound. Both my mom and my dad went to that one with me. My boyfriend at the time, my son's dad, he was at work and like he worked for the same company my dad worked for. So we went in for the ultrasound and they were like, okay, yeah, you need to like deliver this baby soon. Because your fluid is super low, like dangerously low. So they checked me and they're like 3%, not 3%, 3 centimeters dilated and 70% effaced. They're like, go to the hospital. So they're like, go home, get your stuff, and then just go to the hospital. Be there by like 4:30.
Had they detected that earlier on in your pregnancy, or it was just at that scan that they noticed it the first time?
They had known that I had low amniotic fluid, like, it wasn't, like, dangerously low, but they were just like, "Stay hydrated, like, you might just be a little bit dehydrated today." But it just kept getting lower and lower, and then finally that last, appointment, they're just like, "Yeah, it's time to go." So, my mom and I, we went to the house, got my stuff, got everything ready. My dad, he was a HR manager, went to work and, told my son's dad, like, "Hey, Angelica's going to the hospital. Don't worry about rushing," and then just meet us at the hospital. Got to the hospital at like 4:30, and then they looked at me and they're like, "Have you eaten today?" I was like, "The last time I ate was 11:30 this morning." And they're like, "Okay, let's get you some food before we induce you." So I got induced. Thankfully, my son was head down, and he had been head down the entire pregnancy. So got induced at like 9:30. By like 3 o'clock in the morning, I was begging for the epidural because my mom was like, "Just go through labor for a little bit. That way you don't want to do it again sometime soon." I'm like, "Sounds good, mom." Like, perfect. Obviously that helped because I waited 11 years before I had another kid. So, I was begging for the epidural at that point because I hadn't like progressed. I legit went from a 3 when I left the doctor's office to a 4 in that time frame on Pitocin and all that. And then after I got the epidural, I know they had to do my epidural twice. First time they kind of messed up. Second time they got it good.
Once you got the epidural, were you like, "Okay, we're we're good, it's gonna be a breeze from
Yeah,
here," or did it still
yeah.
take quite some time?
It took quite a bit of time still, but it was a lot easier. I was also doing schoolwork while I was in labor. My classes had started 9 days before I had my son, and I had all of my teachers, they're like, "Okay, yeah, you're fine, like, take your time, get your stuff turned in." But I had one professor that was like, "No, you need to turn this in. I don't care if you're having a baby or not. If you don't turn it in, you're not getting a grade for it." I'm like, "Okay." Sitting here writing a music appreciation paper while I'm in labor, when I was getting my diaper bag and everything ready to go, my mom was like, "Angelica, you don't need your laptop." I was like, "Mom, I have schoolwork that I have to do." The funny thing also is like my doctor was on vacation at the time. I also did not realize that his wife was also an OB. And she was the first doctor to take care of me during like my labor. And when she was leaving, she was like, "I'll tell my husband that you're doing good." And I was like, "Okay, why are you telling your husband
Okay.
about me?" And she's like, "My husband's Dr. So and so." And I'm like, "Okay, like you should have started off with that." Like,
Yeah, that's like a so
but
like, "I'll let my husband know you're doing good," like, it just happens
like,
for all of my
okay.
patients.
Yeah, no, but they were rotating me from side to side with a peanut ball in between my legs to get me to dilate. I remember telling them, like, "I feel pressure," and they're like, "Oh, it's time to go." I had a little bit of feeling to be able to push. I only pushed for, like, 5 to 10 minutes, so it's not like I was pushing for hours on end.
Did they give you an option of, like, a position to push in, or did they just, like, leave you on your back and say, "Here you go"?
They just left me on my back, and they're like, "Here you go." I remember I had my mom by my legs and then my son's dad, like, up by my, shoulders and everything because he was like, "I am not cutting that cord. Doctors get paid to do that." And I was like, "Mom, do you wanna cut the cord?" She's like, "Absolutely, I do." She's like, "I have never witnessed birth other than, like, giving birth myself." So she's like, "It would be an honor."
Oh, that's super special.
Yeah, it is.
So after he was delivered, your mom cut the cord. Did they let you have that skin to skin time, or did they kind of take
Yeah.
him straight away and get him cleaned up?
They let me have that, I believe it was an hour of skin to skin time before they started doing stuff, with him, and I know that, like, after that hour, that's when they're like, "Okay, we need to get his weight, we need to do this, we need to do this." I'm like, "Okay, do whatever." I remember him pooping all over me too. I immediately brought him out and, like, just pooped right down me, and I'm like, "This is disgusting. Can I shower?"
You're like, "Welcome to motherhood."
Yeah, right, not even 10 minutes after you were born. But, no, everything with my son's, delivery and everything, it went well. I think I know this is more TMI, but, I
No
got
such
2
thing.
stitches.
We want it all.
I had 2 stitches, and I really don't think that there was any other type of, like, anything else that went wrong during the delivery.
Did you have a pretty easy postpartum experience or did you attempt breastfeeding? How did that go?
I knew from the get-go that I was not gonna breastfeed. I was strictly
Mhm.
gonna just formula feed, and I got a lot of, like, backlash from that from, like, my doctor, and then also, I was on WIC, and I remember one time this was during when I was pregnant. They had called me and they're like, "Do you wanna speak to, like, a lactation consultant or anything?" I was like, "No, I'm gonna formula feed." They legit were like, "Good luck with that," and then hung up on me, and I was like, "Oh, well, thank
What?
you. I appreciate that." Yeah.
And it was
So
just because they would rather obviously you breastfeed than have to pay for
yeah,
formula, is that what it was?
yeah, yeah, I think so. But I was like, okay, thanks." And I brought it up at like my next WIC appointment after that, and they were just like, "Okay, we don't know who you spoke to." But like I said, strictly knew I was going to formula feed. My son had no problems feeding. I swear he was eating like 3 ounces by the time we left the hospital, and we were only in the hospital for like 2 or 3 days. So he was a pretty healthy baby.
So there was quite a little bit of a age gap between your first
Yeah.
pregnancy and then your second pregnancy. So tell us kind of
Yes.
leading up to the twins pregnancy. Obviously you didn't know it was twins at that point, but did
No,
you decide that you were going to get pregnant or was this another surprise?
this was another surprise.
We
Um,
love we love surprise
so
babies.
Funny enough, my boyfriend and I had been together we've been together for, I wanna say it's like 5 years now, 6 years. I honestly don't even know at this point. And the last, 3 years before that or whatever, we did long distance. So, like, I had lived in Virginia, then I moved down here to Texas, and we were long distance for that time. And he had moved down here, and 6 months into him being here, ended up getting pregnant. And we had just moved into a new house. But, legit with my oldest son, it was 6 months that I was together with my son's dad that I ended up falling pregnant, and I was like, "I don't know what it is in 6 months, but, it's gonna
That's
stop."
the marker.
Yeah. So he 6 months into him living here, I get pregnant, and I remember just, kinda just feeling sick. I went and dropped my son off to his dad's in, West Virginia for spring break, and I ended up getting sick when I was out there for the day. And so when I was flying back home, my ears were clogged up, my nose was all clogged up, so I was like, "Okay, it's probably just the pressure and everything." That lasted for about a week, and then my ears were just, still just clogged up and whatnot, and I thought I was having some inner ear issues. Went to the doctor, and she's like, "Yeah, you have bubbles on your, eardrums." So she's like, "That's gonna cause you to be nauseous and dizzy," and I was like, "Okay, cool, whatever." Didn't think anything of it. Got all of that to subside, and then, I was still nauseous, still dizzy, and I'm like, "When's my period supposed to be here?" I checked my app, and I'm, like, a week and a half late. I was like, "Oh, okay." My boyfriend, my son, and I go out for my birthday for dinner, and, I was still just not feeling good, and so we get home. I'm sitting there talking to my boyfriend. I was like, "Might need to take a pregnancy test." And he's like, "Are you kidding me?" I'm like, "No." So he goes out and gets me one. And I was like, "I'll take it in the morning. I don't wanna take it right now. I'll go take it in the morning." And next morning comes around, "I'm not gonna take it today. Like, I feel better. It's fine." And then he was like, "You need to take it." So, next day comes along, the 27th, didn't take it that morning, and then finally he was just like, "You need to take the dang test." So, like, it's the evening of March 27th. He goes out to, hang out with some people, and, I just like, okay, I might as well just take this test and get it over with. I'm talking to one of my friends, like my best friend, and I'm peeing on a stick. And she FaceTimes me immediately and she's like, "Oh my God, are you taking that test?" I was like, "Yeah." Pull it up. It's immediately positive. And I'm just like, okay. I was like, I need to call my boyfriend. Call him and he's like, "What?" And I was like, you might wanna come home." And he was like, "Why?" And I was like, so I took that test and he was like, "Oh, crap." I actually used profanities, but I'm not gonna do that right now. Uh, Keep it censored a little bit. I was like, "You might wanna come home." And he was like, "Okay." So I tell him, and he comes home. I'm sitting there just sobbing, um, because my mom passed away back in 2023, so this time, I don't have my mom. And, I don't know what I'm gonna do. So, we talk about it, and we're just like, "Okay, everything's gonna be okay. Everything's fine." I talked to my primary care doctor the next day, and I'm just like, "Hey, I'm pregnant. I need a referral to OB." And he's like, "Okay." He gets me that referral. I get a call, and they're like, "The earliest appointment we have is like April 17th." And I'm like, "Okay, cool."
And what was the
Meanwhile,
date when you found out?
March 27th.
Okay. So a couple weeks.
And then had my appointment, and they were like, we're talking about it. And they're like, "Oh, so you had a little bit of an age gap between your pregnancies." And I was like, "Yeah." Um, Obviously a little bit of weight gain too between my 2 pregnancies. And they did the ultrasound, and I looked at the screen, like, when she did the transvaginal ultrasound, and I'm like, "That looks like there's 2 little circles." I was like, "Maybe I'm hallucinating." I was like, "It's not twins." And so I just, like, lay back and everything, and she's like, "So, you're having twins." I remember putting my hands over my face, and I was like, "No, I'm not." And she's like, "Yeah, honey, you are." And I was like, "No, I'm not." And she's like, "Yeah." I said a lot of, like, explicit words. There is nobody in my family with twins. Nobody has ever had twins. But the doctor, she was like, sometimes women over the age of 30 or women with a higher BMI do have a higher chance of having multiple. And I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, okay. Interesting. Obviously, come home, tell my boyfriend, like, hey, might want to sit up for this. I woke him up and he was like, what's wrong with the baby? I was like, you mean babies? And he was like, what? And I was like, we're having twins. And he was like, no, we're not. And I'm like, yeah, we are. And held up the ultrasound and he was like, oh my God. Oh my God.
How did your son take it when you told him the news that not only am I pregnant, but there will be two?
Like, breaking the news to my son that I was pregnant in general, he took it really hard. 'Cause, obviously, he's the only child here, but he has 2 little brothers at his dad's house, and, he is, like, always told me, "You can't ever have any other babies." I'm like, "Okay, okay, whatever." So, when I told him that I was pregnant in general, he was very mad. He cried and didn't talk to me for almost, like, 2 hours. I had to go, like, play video games with him just to even, like, coerce him into talking to me. And, then when I found out it was twins, I was like, "Hey, like, I just wanna let you know that," I was like, "I had an ultrasound today," and he was like, "Yeah?" And I was like, I'm having twins." He looks at me and he's like, "You've got to be kidding me." And I'm like, "No." And he was like, "Seriously?" He was upset about it for sure. I think he might have been more mad about it than, like, upset.
Yeah,
Now that they're here, he absolutely loves them, and he's, like, the best big brother, and I had no doubt in my mind that he would be, but he just wants to be, like, Mr. Cool, like, I don't like my siblings. Like, I'll ask him, "Hey, can you, like, hold your sister?" Or, "Hey, can you hold your brother?" And he was like, "Do they smell?" And I'm like, "No, they don't smell." And he's like, "Okay, I'll hold them." He loves having a little sister. He told me that the other day. He's like, "I actually like having a little sister." And, she absolutely adores him too. She sees him and she just lights up, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's the cutest thing ever."
that's so sweet. So you find out that it's twins. You kind of tell everyone that you need to tell. And from there, like you mentioned, with it being kind of boosted up to a high risk pregnancy, did they refer you to a special high risk doctor or did you continue seeing the same OB?
Um, so I saw my regular OB and then I saw maternal fetal medicine. And honestly, with my regular OB, I didn't see the same OB twice. I legit saw random OBs every single time I went to my doctor's appointment. I think there was 2 that I saw regularly, but one of them was my maternal fetal medicine doctor. And then had more ultrasounds than what I did with my son. Is I it was 9 weeks, and then I think I had my an ultrasound at 14 weeks, and then again at 20 weeks, and then it was, like, 24, 26, 28. So, several different ones almost every 2 weeks, and then it was, like, every week that I was getting them.
Did they
Yes.
bring up weight at all? So starting weight, or you need to only gain this much weight or anything? Or did they just look at the twins as the part of the high risk?
Well, when I found out that I was having twins, they were just like, "We want you to gain 10 to 15 pounds." And I'm like, "Okay." I don't know if that's real possible with twins, especially like my twins were healthy twins. They came out and they were like both 6 pounds. So it's just 12 pounds a baby in general.
Right.
And I think I gained maybe a total of like 25 pounds with them. I know I didn't gain like a whole bunch of weight. Um, but they never said like that my weight was part of the reason why it was just high risk. But they definitely were like, don't gain a whole bunch of weight. I remember I had posted on one of like the plus size mom groups that I'm on because at one of my doctor's appointments, just because of my weight, I had never felt like more dehumanized than I did at that appointment because of how the doctor treated me, just because of my weight. She had asked me, she's like, has anybody talked to you about like a C-section or a vaginal delivery? And I was like, I know that right now they said that there was no issues with me having a vaginal delivery, but I'm assuming since both my babies are kind of breech, I was like, I'm going to have a C-section. She looks me up and down and is like, yeah, that's what's best for you and your body type. And I'm like, thank you.
And that's so interesting because the other doctors had never said anything
No,
about it.
no, and, like, that doctor I had never left an appointment crying before until that appointment, and I remember, like, calling my boyfriend, and I was just sobbing, and he was like, "I'm about to leave work right now," and I'm like, "No, don't do that," and also, like, being pregnant with twins kills your hips. They hurt so bad all the time, and I was still working up until I had the babies. So 37 weeks with 12 pounds of babies and twins, and my job consists of a lot of walking. I looked at the doctor at that appointment. I was like, "Is there anything that I can do?" And they're like, "Well, we can't write you out just because of that. And it's probably just because of your weight that you're having hip issues." No, I'm having hip issues because I have two babies kicking me in the side and like stretching my hips out because I never had hip issues before. Don't have hip issues now. There's an occasional time where it's like, "Oh, I've been sitting for too long," but like that was not the case. Um, but, oh, a couple of my appointments, like I said, they were just like they had put me down just because of my weight, and it was not fun. Definitely
Yeah.
cried a lot more at those appointments than, any other appointment.
Did you specifically request not to see those providers, or you said you were gonna see a different provider each time anyways?
I had like, had to call and, like, make a formal complaint about those providers, and they weren't put on my case again, but like I said, I posted that on, like, one of the plus size mom groups, just kind of asking for advice on what I should do because I was like, "I have no idea what to do in this
Yeah.
situation," and they were the ones that were like, "Call the charge nurse and file a complaint," or, like, "Call whoever and file a complaint because that is ridiculous."
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you said, it's people that have gone through, unfortunately, those situations before.
Mhm,
And while I think it's getting better, there is still a lot of stigma and bias around plus size women in the medical field. And then,
mhm.
especially when it's pregnancy related. And some people have
Yeah,
great experiences, but then you do have some still that have the comments and the not nice things to say.
yeah, absolutely.
So I know you said early on, like, the nausea and everything. Did you notice that get better in the 2nd trimester, or did you have any other symptoms?
I was I wanna say it was, like, 16 weeks when finally, like, my morning sickness stopped. I do know that I was just really sick and I was so tired. Like normally I could go to work and come home and still run and like do other stuff. I would go to work, come home and sleep all night. Like I was either working or sleeping and like my days off I would just sleep. So it was like I had zero energy all the time. So that was my other symptom. But other than that, no. And I honestly didn't even crave anything crazy. Like with my son, I craved steak with ranch. This pregnancy, like I didn't crave anything. It was like, oh, food sounds nice, but like the first 16 weeks I couldn't really eat.
I was
It
about to
was
say,
very
did you have
minimal.
any aversions of, like, these are the things I absolutely don't want, or it was just everything that early period?
It was everything, especially meat. I was like, meat sounds disgusting. Ground beef, chicken, everything. It just sounded so gross. And I just lived off crackers for a little bit. Other than that, like, really didn't eat much other than some watermelon. That was about it. I remember I would cut up at least one or two watermelons a week and just eat it.
At least you were staying
And
hydrated.
yeah, but, also with this pregnancy, I did have gestational diabetes again, and that had to be managed with insulin, and actually had a continuous glucose monitor. So, like, if I would eat watermelon, that is one of the foods that you shouldn't really eat as a diabetic because it does have a high sugar content, and, like, I would eat watermelon, and then my blood sugar would spike, and then it would drop, and so it was just up and down. They had tested me early because I had it with my son with that pregnancy, and then obviously, like, with a higher BMI, they're like, "We're gonna test you at 14 weeks instead of the 28 weeks." But if you pass this 14 weeks one, like at 28 weeks, you'll have to do it again. But if you don't pass, you're not going to have to worry about taking the test again. So I did my 1 hour test and they told me they're like, oh, yeah, you can eat up to like an hour before you take a test. And I was like, okay, cool. I failed by like 1 point. And I'm like, okay. So I took my 3 hour test and the two that were high, it was the 1 hour right after I drank the drink. And then I think the second hour. They were both high, but not super high. I think it was like less than 5 points above the high range. They decided to tell me they're like, "Oh, you have type 2 diabetes because you're not 28 weeks yet." And I'm like, "Are we gonna do any other blood work to like verify that?" And they're like, "Yeah, we'll test your A1C." My A1C came back at like a 4.1.
which is like completely normal.
Yeah, I'm like, "How are you gonna tell me that I have type 2 diabetes?" And they're like, "It's because of your weight." And I'm like, "Okay,
That's
yeah."
so interesting. I've never heard, like, even if you have to do the early glucose test, usually it will get attributed to gestational diabetes. So it's interesting the fact that
Mhm.
even though it was early, they said it was just type 2 if you've never had issues before
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, and, like, I have legit never had any type of, uh, issues with it at all. Like, never even been diagnosed with prediabetes,
Yeah.
and so I'm like, "Okay, whatever." So I had blood sugars monitored, which thankfully I did, and, took insulin and whatnot because my blood sugars were running high, and they're like, "It kinda is normal with twin pregnancy for your blood sugars to be, like, up and down, up and down, up and down crazy."
So from there, they managed it. You said with insulin, you had a continuous glucose monitor. Was that
Mhm.
pretty effective in managing it? I know you said there's some ups and downs, but were there really any issues throughout the rest of pregnancy?
There wasn't really any issues. I think the biggest issue that I had was fighting with my insurance about my CGM. So the Dexcoms last for 10 days, I believe it is. 7 days, 10 days, something like that. So I would get 3 of them and I'd be like $70, but like my insurance would be like, "Oh, every time you need one, we need a pre-authorization for it." And I'm just like, "Why can't I just get a refill?" And so that was fun that I think finally with my last month and a half of pregnancy, I just stuck my finger multiple times a day because I was like, I'm not even gonna deal with fighting with my insurance anymore.
So your gestational diabetes, everything was managed. Did they look because of either that or because it was a twin pregnancy of like letting you know, hey, they may come early, or how was that discussion early on?
Um, with twins, they typically don't let you go past 38 weeks in general. So they're like, okay, yeah, 38 weeks is when we're planning on it. Planning on delivering the babies, either we induce you or you have a C-section. And for most of my pregnancies, there was no problems. They're just like, you'll probably be able to have a vaginal delivery. And I'm like, that'd be great. I don't want to be cut open. And because it was just a fear, like nothing against C-sections whatsoever. Because I ended up having a C-section, but I was just afraid of getting cut open. And so I think the main talk was just like, okay, you'll probably have the babies at like 36, 37 weeks, 38 at the latest.
Did you make it to that 38-week mark, or did you go into labor before that?
I made it to the 37-week mark. I was supposed to have a C-section on October 27th. We obviously live in Texas. We have no family around us. So my boyfriend's parents were driving down from Virginia to help us. And they got into town on October 25th at like 5 o'clock in the evening. My water broke at 9 o'clock in the evening. So I ended up going into labor that evening. And I swear up and down it was because my son made me so mad that day because all I wanted him to do was clean up his room. And that little preteen attitude. He's like, I don't want to do it. And I'm just like, just do it. And I know I got so angry with him. And I'm like, can you just clean up your room? And I know I didn't feel good whatsoever that day too. And my boyfriend's mom was like, call us if you need anything, even if it's in the middle of the night. Call us because my boyfriend worked night shift at the time. I remember going to the bathroom. I wiped and there was some blood. I called my boyfriend and I was like, hey, I think I'm gonna head up to labor and delivery. I just wiped and there's some blood. And he was like, okay, I'll be there in a minute. And like I had ordered my son and I some ice cream because we were both like, oh, let's get some ice cream. It was storming out and I was like, I'm not going out to get it, but I'll DoorDash it. The ice cream had just come, so I went and picked it up. gave my son his and I told him to put mine in the freezer. And I got to my hallway, all of a sudden, like, my water broke. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I was frozen. I call my boyfriend's mom. She is not answering. So I call my boyfriend's dad and he's like, "Hey honey, what's up?" And I'm like, "My water just broke." And he's like, "Amy's in the shower." And I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Call 911." Call my boyfriend, like, "Hey, just want to let you know my water just broke." And he was like, "Oh my God, I'm on my way." He works about 20 minutes away from where we live. And so, like, I think he gets home in like less than 15 minutes. And I ended up calling 911. Granted, contractions hadn't started yet, but I was like, I just want to get to the hospital immediately
Yeah.
because I just feel like I need to. So I
Yeah.
call 911. Ambulance pulls up. My boyfriend pulls up right after. And the biggest thing that my son is worried about, this isn't cotton candy ice cream. I literally don't care, dude. So, like, my boyfriend pulls up right afterwards. My son's over there saying, "I didn't get cotton candy ice cream," as I'm getting on a gurney.
That's so funny.
Ambulance takes me. My boyfriend waits for his parents to get to our house, and then my boyfriend gets up to the hospital maybe 5 minutes after I get up there, and they check me in. They already knew that I was gonna have a C-section. My daughter was breech and my son was transverse, so they did the ultrasound just to double check and make sure, and they're like, "Okay, let's see, like, how dilated you are." She goes and checks. She's like, "'Kay, this just turned into an emergency." And we're like, "What?" And, because I was feeling a little bit of pressure, but not a lot, and was feeling, like, period cramps, and I do also remember looking at my boyfriend when they were, like, checking me in, and I was like, "I feel like I need to poop." And, obviously, if you have had a kid, you know what that feeling is, but she was like, "It just turned into an emergency." She's like, "You're 3 centimeters dilated, but her feet are coming out."
Mm.
And so my daughter was, like, coming out with her feet. They look at my boyfriend, they're like, "You can't go back there, we have to put her under." So I just remember getting wheeled back to the OR, and there was a doctor. I might start crying right now too. Her name is
You're
Doctor
fine.
DeLucchi. She was amazing. From the time I left my boyfriend until the time I went under, she held my hand the entire time. She's like, "You're gonna be okay, everything's gonna be okay," and all of that. So they prepped me and, they were like, "With your stomach, we might have to do, like, one up here instead of down below," and I'm like, "Okay, do whatever you need to do, just get my babies out safe and get me safe." But she told me, she's like, "Okay, we're just gonna do the normal C-section. It'll be okay." She's like, "Okay, we're gonna put you under," and I remember, like, having a full anxiety attack because of, like, the mask over my face and the feeling of, like, I couldn't breathe, but I know that I could breathe because it was just oxygen in that mask, but it just felt like I couldn't. And, like, my arms were strapped down to the table, so that was giving me more anxiety, and next thing I know, the anesthesiologists are waking me up, and they're like, "You have 2 beautiful babies, like, they're in the NICU," and then, I also remember looking for my boyfriend, I was like, "Where's Eric?" They're like, "He's with the babies in the NICU," and I'm like, "Okay, how are my babies?" And they're like, "They're okay, they're doing fine," and next thing I know, my boyfriend's in, and they're asking me the amount of pain that I'm in, and they're like, "On a scale of 1 to 10, what's your pain level?" I look at them dead in the face, I'm like, 17. I was in so much pain. I looked at them and I was like, "Can I get a tap block?" And they're like, "Absolutely." So they had an anesthesiologist came in and gave me a tap block, which that was amazing.
So because they did the general, they didn't give you, like, an epidural or a spinal tap or anything like that
Yep,
originally. So when you woke up, you
yep.
could feel everything.
But I was in so much pain,
Wow.
especially, like, before they did the tap block, they did that fundal massage, and
Ooh, the
that
worst.
it hurt so bad. Like, my boyfriend looked at me, he was like, I wanted to throw up because it looked like it hurt so bad. I was like, "Oh, it did." And I remember when I woke up also, they told me, they're like, "You lost a lot of blood, you need a blood transfusion." But they didn't tell me how much blood I lost. They're just like, "You lost a lot, so you need a transfusion." So, in recovery, I was in recovery for about 5.5 to 6 hours before they finally wheeled me back to, like, the mother baby unit, and so they gave me my blood transfusion. One of the nurses was like, "Are you hungry?" And I was like, "Honestly, yeah, I'm starving, like, I need something to eat." And she's like, "I made you a turkey sandwich." And I'm like, "God bless you." It's pretty sure it was, like, a nasty type of turkey, and I was just like, "I don't care, it tastes good." And, we lived off of those for, like, the 3 days that we were in the hospital because that was, like, the best thing that they would serve us. And so She made us this little sandwiches, or she at least just unwrapped them and gave them to us, and gave me a drink that was like apple juice, cranberry juice, and Sprite, and I thought it was the best thing ever.
The mommy mocktail.
Yeah, and finally, after my blood transfusion, I was able to go to, like, the mother baby unit and, like, actually get in a bed, and, thankfully, I had full use of my legs, so I was able to transfer to the bed easily, but, like, obviously, just coming out of abdominal surgery, basically, you couldn't use those muscles because it still hurt a lot. And like we sat in there and we're like, can we just get an update on my babies? Because they're in the NICU and they're like, oh, well, he can go down and like go see him. And I was like, I just want an update on my babies. And like my boyfriend, God bless him, but he cannot remember anything. He's like, I don't know. He showed me pictures and he was like, I can't remember which one's which. I'm like, thank you. So, like, we had asked them for an update when I was still in recovery, but it was, like, 6 hours after that they finally, like, sent somebody in, and they were just like, "Babies are doing good," all that stuff. Told me that they had finally lowered their CPAP and then that they were just, like, transitioning to room air. They're like, "You can go down and see them when you feel up to it," and I was like, "Okay." And it took them forever to get my, catheter out, and they're like, "Before you do anything, you have to pee." And I'm like, "Okay." So, like, I had to force myself to get up and go pee, and then I had the nurse wheel me down because at that time, my boyfriend's parents showed up and my oldest son came in, and so they all went down to the NICU, and they're just like, "The nurse can wheel you down or whatever." Well, they were gonna wait for me to get wheeled down, but the nurse was taking forever, and they were just like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "You guys just go, like, I'll be there in a few minutes." Nurse wheeled me down, met my babies for the first time, which was super emotional, obviously, and I think at that point, they were, like, 14 hours old before I met them. So that sucked. The fact that I didn't get, like, that, obviously, the first hour with them, but I knew I wouldn't because of the fact, like, I was put under general anesthesia. But both of them, they were very healthy when they were born. They did have some respiratory distress. That's mainly because of the fact they didn't go through the birth canal, so they didn't have that pressure, like, pushing
Yeah.
the fluid out. That was the reason why they had to go to the NICU, but the reason why because they were in there my son was in there for 14 days, my daughter was in there for, 10 days. The only reason why they were staying in the NICU was because they weren't eating. They were being very finicky about the bottles that they wanted. They didn't want those
Mm,
Dr. Brown's bottles. So, as soon as we, like, changed the bottle type, they immediately started eating, and they were good.
that's great. So how long were you in the hospital at the same time of them? Did you end up getting discharged before they did, obviously?
Yeah, I did. So, I was, like, admitted that Saturday night, and I wanna say by that Monday or Tuesday, I was going home. I think by Tuesday, I was going home.
And how was that? I know that's very emotional when you know you have to leave your babies in the NICU.
Yes, I cried the entire way home. Uh And thank God that the NICU here has that, like, Angel Eye app, so you can watch your babies, like, 24/7, and God bless the NICU nurses at the hospital that they were at because they were just amazing. I think we had, like, 2 or 3 bad nurses, but they only had them, like, 1 time, like, for 1 shift, during their stay, and I was like, "Okay." But those NICU nurses that we had were absolutely amazing. Whenever I would call, whether it was 1 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning, they were always like, they were doing great, they're perfect, always giving me updates. And they were also updating me on like that Angel Eye app because they can message you through there too. But they when I left them, like, the first night, it was absolutely awful. I didn't sleep. All I was doing was staring at that app, staring at the camera, calling, seeing how they were doing, and I know the first week, my boyfriend was so annoyed, he was like, "I just wanna get a little bit of sleep," and, like, 7 AM would roll around, and I'd get my oldest off to school, and then I'd be like, "Okay, can you take me to the hospital now?" And he's like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah." I would be up at the hospital, like, all day.
Were they in their own room that you were able to go into?
So, they were in 2 different spots, like, the first area that they were at, it was a shared area, but when they got moved to, like, the step down unit, because it wasn't, like they were only in there for feeding issues, so they're like, "Okay, there's no need for them to be in, like, the intensive care unit." They had their own room there, which was super nice because, like, 1, we didn't have to worry about, like, oh, if we're being too loud, like, we could just kind of shut the door a little bit, but we really were never too loud at all. But like I said, I think they were in the intensive care unit for I wanna say it was, like, 2 days after I left the hospital, and then they were in the other one for about a week and a half.
And then the only
Yeah,
markers they were looking for was just that growth and being able to eat.
yeah, because like I said, they both did not like Dr. Brown's bottles whatsoever, and they still really don't. Um, my daughter did really well on, like, because I was attempting to pump this time. I don't know if I even said anything about that. I was attempting to pump to get them, like, breast milk and everything, and I think I pumped for about a month, and then I was like, "I can't do this." Like, not for me. But I had the Spectra bottles. My daughter really loved those. She actually used those until probably about 3, 4 weeks ago when I transitioned her to, like, the same bottles that my son uses, and we tried him on the Spectre bottles as well. He didn't like those. He had a hard time, like, opening his mouth and getting his tongue in a correct position to, like, eat. And we were using that, and the feeding therapist came down, and he was like, "Let's see if we can get him to, like, eat from a different type of bottle." And he had started doing well with it, and I was like, "You know what? I have this other bottle, the ma'am bottles." I was like, "Do we wanna try that? Because the nipple is flat." And he's like, "You know what? We can give it a try." And that same day was the day before they were talking about taking out my son's feeding tube, and, while my boyfriend and I were changing him, my son just grabbed his feeding tube and ripped it out of his face. And I remember looking at his nurse and I was like, "What are we supposed to do with this?" And she's like,
Right.
"We'll put it in later." Then the feeding therapist came in and we're like, "Okay, we're gonna try the man bottles." And the way that he ate immediately and perfectly with the man bottles, it was like day and night. And even the feeding therapist was like, "I love how he's eating with this." And he's like, "We're gonna stick with this bottle." And he went from having 50% of his feeds, um, through a bottle to, like, 87 to 90% of his feeds through a bottle overnight. And also with him taking out his own feeding tube, because they never put his feeding tube back in after he ripped it out of his face.
So once they got good to feed, were they looking just strictly them being able to transfer with a bottle, or were they looking for certain weight goals?
No, they were just wanting to make sure that they could eat from a bottle and that they were continuously gaining weight, which they were. They both before, getting out of the NICU, they had both regained their birth weight. So my daughter was 6 pounds, 1.7 ounces. My son was 6 pounds, 1.1 ounces. And that they had both gotten down to about 5.5 pounds. But by the time my daughter left the NICU, she was 6 pounds, 5 ounces. And when my son left the NICU, I think he was 6 pounds, 6 ounces. So they both regained their weight pretty well.
Yeah, that's
So,
great.
yeah.
So talk us through once they've kind of hit all of these milestones, the NICU finally telling y'all, "Hey, we think they're gonna be able to go home." What were your emotions and what was going on at that time?
So my daughter, like I said, came home before my son did. And I remember when I brought her home, I was crying that same day, like, that all day because I was like, "I have to leave my son here," and my boyfriend is like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "We have to leave, him here," and I was like, "We have to take her home. We have to separate them, and I don't want to." And he's like, "It's gonna be okay." He's like, "Get us in a routine with her, and then we can probably just slide him right on in." I remember them asking me, they're like, "Do you want us to discharge her immediately? Do you wanna give it some time?" I was like, "No, I don't wanna discharge her immediately. I don't wanna be leaving the hospital here at, like, 8 AM with my daughter and leave my son here all day by himself." Typically, I would get up there at 8 AM, and I would leave at, like, they're not the last feed, but one of their feeds was at, like, 5 and 5:30. After that feed, I would go home and then, like, eat dinner with my son, all that stuff, and, we'd end up going back to the hospital around 8, 9 o'clock. So I'd have like 2, 3-hour break before I'd go back. And I remember that first night that we brought my daughter home, we came home, we ate dinner, and I was like, "Okay, like, let's get ready to go." I ended up falling asleep on the couch, and I didn't wake back up, and my boyfriend was taking care of the baby and everything, and I was like woke up and it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, "I didn't go see Wyatt." And I'm just like, "Oh my gosh." I felt
Yeah.
so bad, and my boyfriend is like, "You needed the sleep, Angelica."
Exactly.
And
It's such a that crazy period where that whole situation is so mentally exhausted. but
Yeah.
you were recovering from a major surgery as well. So it's that
Yeah.
balance of taking care of yourself, getting the sleep, but also having that mom guilt and not wanting to leave
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, I had, like, severe mom guilt when I had to leave my son up there by him well, like, not up by himself, but, like, without his sister. I felt so bad, cried. Again, it was, like, the first day all over. I sat there, watched the camera all night long, and I think it was, like, the second night that my son was up there by himself, one of his nurses had turned the camera off and, like, didn't the camera back on. Because whenever they would mess with them, like, either change their diapers or feed them or anything like that, they would turn the camera off, which totally understand, but she never turned it back on, and, it gave me so much anxiety, and so I ended up going up there, like, in the middle of the night, and it was one of those nurses that, like, it wasn't one of our favorite nurses, and I know she was like, "He didn't really eat well with this bottle, blah, blah, blah," and I'm like, "He's eaten perfectly fine with this bottle, so are you just not giving him time, whatever." And I remember being so upset because of the fact, like, she just didn't put the effort into feeding him with that bottle because I had did every feed during that day shift. I think it was like 8 AM to 8 PM. I had did every feed, and he ate 100% every single time. But then come the night shift, she's like, "Oh, he's only eating gotta eat 50 meals." She's like, "He's only eating 25. Oh, he's only eating 30." And I'm like, "Seriously? How am I getting
Yeah,
him to
when
eat?"
every time other in the day it had been
Yeah.
fine.
So, like, it was that type of nurse, and I was just like, "Okay, well, I guess I'm gonna stay up here for a little bit." My boyfriend was like, "You don't need to be staying up at the hospital at 1 o'clock in the morning by yourself and walking through the hospital and the parking lot and everything." And I'm like, "I'll be fine." Have my daughter in tow with me. Thankfully, like, the hospital that they were at, it's an amazing hospital. And like I said, the NICU nurses, top tier, 10 out of 10. Definitely nominated like 3 of those nurses for a Daisy Award because they were just amazing. Me being emotionally exhausted during that time when, like, my son was in the NICU by himself, I don't think I've ever been more emotionally exhausted. And I remember there was one day specifically, I was just up at the NICU by myself with my daughter and my son. My oldest son comes home from school. He texts me. He's like, "I think I broke my thumb." And so I'm like, "Okay, like, I have to leave. I'll be back later." I came home and I was just so drained. And I didn't even walk in the door. I called my son and I was like, "Come on." Took him to urgent care to get his thumb checked out to see if it was broken. Was not broken. I came home. I just sat on the couch and just cried because I was just exhausted. And my boyfriend's
Yeah.
parents were like, "Okay, we're gonna go." They're like, "We don't know if, like, you want us here." And I was like, "It's just been a day."
So when they gave you the news that your son could come home as well, how was that just like the most exciting news you got?
It was. It truly was. And I remember the day that we did bring him home. We had the same nurse uh, that discharged us with my daughter. Well, discharged my daughter. She was the nurse that discharged my son as well. And she was like, "Okay, did you guys want to, like, hang out for a little bit?" I said, "No, like,
Get us
let
out
me
of
go
here.
home now." And she's like, "Much different than when sister went home." I said, "Oh, absolutely. I don't want to hang around this hospital anymore." I'm like, if I ended up at the hospital again, like, 10 years from now, it'd still be too soon. But, as soon as they were just like, "Yeah, we can discharge him," I'm like, "Okay, can you sign the discharge papers now?" I remember, like, leaving and I was like, "Oh my God, I never have to go to this NICU again." It was an amazing feeling.
So right after with you kind of going back and forth from the NICU, how was your healing physically?
I think me getting up and walking and kind of like having to force myself to walk to and from the NICU helped a lot because I was back to driving about a week after the surgery. Um, and I was walking without like any type of pain, probably with about 5 days after my surgery. There was one day that I completely overdid it and I was kicking myself in the butt for doing that. I had ended up walking, like, from the NICU, which was a very far walk, to the cafeteria in the hospital. It was a super long walk, and my boyfriend's parents and my boyfriend were both like, "Are you sure you don't want a wheelchair?" And I was like, "No, I'm fine." It was a slow walk, but I did it, and I remember when we got halfway back, and I was like, "I need a wheelchair." So they got me a wheelchair and wheeled me back up. Healing was pretty good. At my 6-week appointment, they're like, "Your incision has healed beautifully." They're like, "There's no issues with your incision."
Do you have like an apron belly or did you do anything to help with the
I do.
incision?
I do have an apron belly, which I hate that, but I mean, it is what it is, and it's
Same
what we're
girl.
here for anyway.
Yep.
Um, But honestly, I was reading on how to help keep that from getting infected or like gross. Put a maxi pad right there, and honestly, I helped did that, and it healed beautifully. And I cannot remember the type of bandage that they put on it, but that bandage was supposed to stay on for a week, and it fell off like 4 or 5 days in, and they're like, "Just take it off," and I'm like, "Okay." Kept it clean and all that stuff, and then, like I said, put a maxi pad right there, and it was good.
That's awesome.
And, like, there's still sometimes where it's like a zing feeling, but nothing crazy like it was when right after it happened.
So once they gave you the go ahead to bring your son home, talk us through those early days of having them both there. What was that like? The newborn trenches, so to speak?
Honestly, the first few days, it wasn't bad. All they did was really sleep. They slept really good. I wish that they would sleep as good as they did, like, now that they did back then. They would definitely wake up every 3 hours like the NICU had them. They had them on a good schedule, and so it was every 3 hours that they were waking up to eat. I think it was probably about a month where they really started to be more social with us.
Yeah, alert and awake.
I know, like, the first week or so, they were like, "You were under general anesthesia, so it does affect them as well." So they're gonna be a little bit sleepier. My son is still one of the sleepiest babies I know. He will eat and then socialize for a little bit and then go to sleep immediately. I think if they were about a month and a half or so is when they started both really getting, pretty bad reflux, and so, that's been a fun journey too.
Did you have to switch them to any special formula or anything like that for the
Yeah.
reflux?
Yeah, so they were on Enfamil, just regular Enfamil, and then, they both got diagnosed with reflux, and they had to switch to Nutramigen.
Does that seem to help? Is their reflux been better with
Yes,
that sensitive formula?
absolutely, it has.
That's great.
It has. A few weeks ago, we actually had to switch my son to an amino acid formula for a couple days because we weren't sure if he had CMPA, which is the cow's milk protein allergy, and because he was having some really, really bad tummy issues. Thankfully, does not have that,
That's
and we
good.
were able to transition him back to the Nutramigen.
So now your son, you said, has embraced them and loves his role as a big
Yes.
brother.
Yeah, he is amazing with them. Legit, I could be like I could call him down from his room and be like, "Hunter, can you bring me a diaper?" Like, as I'm feeding them. He's like, "Absolutely." He'll run down, grab me a diaper. He's like, "Here you go." Granted, it might just be because he's, like, ready to just go back upstairs and play his video game, but, he's a great helper. He'll look at me and be like, "I can hold one if you need me to," and I'm like, "That would be great if you could." And so he'd come and grab one. I always give him the choice. I'm like, "Which one do you want, your brother or your sister?" And he's like, "I don't know. Which one stinks less?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh," because he's always afraid I'm gonna give him one of the babies with, like, a poopy diaper, and I was like, "I'm not gonna do that."
One day they'll be toddlers and they'll stink a little less, so they'll continue to have a bond.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else, I guess, either that you found resource wise, pre pregnancy, pregnancy, or postpartum that you would recommend or share with others?
Um, I mean, honestly, I would definitely recommend getting on those mom groups on like Facebook or whatever because there's so many different like helpful resources through those. Obviously, I'm on just like, regular mom groups and then I'm also on twin mom groups. And I know those twin mom groups have really helped me a lot. And honestly, just reaching out to people whenever you need help. That's honestly my biggest uh suggestion.
I'm glad that overall you had a positive experience and that the babies are home and
Yeah.
healthy and beautiful.
They are, they are. They actually just started daycare today, so thankfully, they've sent me pictures throughout the day already, and it's like those babies seem to have the teachers wrapped around their little fingers already.
Well, thank you so much, Angelica. Your whole experience is great to hear and really an example for many people because you don't hear as many stories, I feel like, with twins specifically. So, having
Mhm.
that information and your experience, I think, will help many other people that are going through the same thing.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad to be on here.
Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. If you enjoyed this episode and want more stories just like this one, please please be sure to like and follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, if you have a moment, please consider leaving us a positive review wherever you're listening to this show. These reviews are the best way for the algorithm to push out our show and get us in front of other plus-size moms who may be looking for a community like this one. Your kind words can help make sure that no one has to go through this journey alone. If you are a fellow plus-size mom and would be interested in sharing your story, please reach out to us at biggerthanbirthpodcast@gmail.com. Use the subject line, "Share my story," and I will be sure to get back to you as soon as possible. Want to put a face to a voice? Head over to any of our social media pages linked in the show notes below to see more photos of today's guest. Any resources or topics discussed in today's episodes will also be linked below. Thanks again for being a part of the Bigger Than Birth community, and we will see you next week. Bye!